Hello, my wonderful, beautiful friends. Guys, welcome back to r/EntitledPeople, where people truly believe it's all about them and nobody else matters. And in today's episode, we've got Karens on planes, Karens at Disneyland, HOA presidents who think they're above their own rules, and one OB tells a story about the time a Karen tries to steal her purse and it backfires so hard. Guys, I hope you enjoy the stories today. Don't shake your heads too hard, and as always, you can send or link your post to this email right here. Let's dive in. So when this happened, I was traveling to Las Vegas to meet up with some friends, and I had pre-booked my seat. Now with this airline, they charge extra for certain seats. I chose a window seat with extra legroom due to my disability, which cost me an additional $45. When boarding, there was a man in my seat with another in the aisle seat. The middle was open. I checked my seat number and then politely told the man that he was in my seat and then asked for him to move. And here's the thing, I'm a petite female and both men were about 6 feet tall and well over 200 pounds. When both opened their mouths, it definitely appeared like they were both used to using their size to get their way. The man in the aisle immediately tells me that the man at the window didn't have to move and that I could sit in the middle. And after all that, the guy said I shouldn't make a scene about it, to just sit down. Of course, hearing him say that really pissed me off. I didn't raise my voice, and I was very polite. I said I wasn't making a scene, but I was asking nicely for the seat I paid for. And that's when the man stood up and he attempted to physically intimidate me. The guy got right in my face. But here's the thing. I worked in frontline healthcare, so I'm used to people attempting to use their size and mouth to intimidate me. And this behavior doesn't work with me. So that's when I decide to take another tactic. I turned my head to the man in my seat and I told him I would make him a deal. If he gives me $50 cash, I will give him my seat. I told him I paid an additional $45 for the seat, and with tax, it should be around $50. I then tell him sternly if he gives me the money, the seat would be his. And this is when he turned to me in shock, and the guy said to me, "You want me to pay you $50 for your seat?" To which I answered, "So you're admitting that you knew this wasn't your seat. I'm gonna call the airline staff and they can take you to your seat. After all, I booked this seat due to me having a disability," which is true, and you are trying to steal it. Now at this point, everyone around us is looking at him, and they didn't have kind looks on their faces. The man turned 14 shades of red and he moved to the middle seat. The guy then pulled his hoodie over his head and he sulked the rest of the flight. His friend did the same thing. Now, the moral of the story is simple. Do not use size to bully others. It may just backfire on you and make your next flight a lot less comfortable. What a crazy sense of entitlement, right? And the don't make a scene comment was such an a-hole thing to say. Like the audacity of somebody to steal someone's seat and tell that person, just let it be, sit somewhere else, don't cause a scene. I'm just super glad that OP was the type to stand up for herself and to not be messed with, because who knows how many people those two have bullied out of their seats in the past. Again, what an a-hole move, like a giant man trying to scare a small woman into giving up her seat. And this person says, "Wow, I'm a 40-year flight attendant and I'm not sure I remember this kind of situation, but I've seen a million. This is easy, just get a flight attendant, preferably a guy, and the problem is solved quickly. It's part of the training to handle this without blinking. I'm sorry this happened to you." The audacity of cheap, entitled people, right? Guys, if you think that story was wild, listen to this next one, where a Karen learns it's not all about herself and she's not so special. So recently, I visited Disneyland for the first time since I was 9 years old. It was a super fun day, and the lines were longer than I remember, but maybe I was just excited back then. My friend and I discovered the single rider lanes, and we took advantage of that due to the shorter wait times, and it didn't matter to us to ride separately. So as we're waiting in that line, a family of 4, a mom, 2 daughters, and a dad, walk through the middle of the line, and they're holding hands. Several people are disgruntled and they're asking what they're doing. And that's when Mom claims they forgot something on the ride. The family then make their way to the part of the ride where the single riders, fast pass riders, and the original line are all in a similar area. And that's when one lady behind me screams, "What did you forget?" And here's the thing. Everyone in the single rider lane is fuming as we all realize that that woman is just waiting to get on the ride with her kids. That's when they get shuffled into the pre-ride movie area before my friend and I. And we are shocked that nobody brought it to any of the staff's attention. Meanwhile, all the single riders are trauma bonding over the lady's boldness and entitlement. So when my friend and I get shuffled into the pre-ride movie area, I tell one of the staff members what the lady and her kids looked like and what she did. He says at this point, since they're already in the line to board the car, he can't do much. We slowly make it to the car boarding line, and lo and behold, there's the lady and her 2 kids. I stop yet another employee and explain the situation. She says she'll let somebody know, but she walks in the opposite direction of the rider operators. And this is when one of the kids runs up to a man directly behind my friend and I, and then pulls on his arm, and he says, "Come on, Dad, let's get on the ride." At this point, we turn around and Dad's right behind us. The guy refuses to join his family, probably because he heard everyone in line complaining about what they did. So everyone starts speaking louder, the whole line. At this point, people are screaming at the guy, saying, "What a terrible example to set for your kids. What makes your family feel so entitled? Everyone's waiting the same, some people for hours. Why do you think you're special? Why lie to get what you want?" The whole line is speaking so loudly, so these people know exactly what we think of them. Dad continues to hang back as he hangs his head in shame, as his family inches closer to the front of the line. The guy's letting people pass him at this point. I had enough at that point as well, so I talked to the people in front of me, and I asked if I could go get the ride operators and let them know what happened, because I'll be damned if they're getting on this ride. Everyone in front of me just happily let me go ahead of them to warn the ride operators. They were all happy to step aside. The mom's blocking the walkway because they're next up. I tap the woman on her side and I say, "Excuse me," and then proceed to stare her down. The woman slides over without a word. I then tell the ride operator, "Hey, this lady and her 2 kids cut the entire line through the single rider's line, claiming she forgot something. You can ask anyone in this line." So hearing me say that, the woman gives me the most evil, disgusted, shocked glare. I walk back to where my friend was, and another woman goes up to the line operator to verify my story. Disney Karen's trying to say that both of us are lying, and that's when everyone in line starts yelling and telling the same story, determined to not let her or her kids on the ride. They were eventually escorted out the side door, and literally everyone in line clapped. I just love how everyone just knew the assignment and they worked together to get this nasty Karen booted. Like, some people truly believe that their time is more valuable than others. And I hope that Karen wasn't only embarrassed, but she learned a lesson from this. I also love how Dad just hung back and was like, "Nope, I am not getting on this ride. You guys can." And here's the thing, guys, like, despite her cutting in front of who knows how many people in line, you know for sure that that woman would be the loudest person to complain if somebody cut in line in front of her, right? Because everyone knows how entitled Karens are always such hypocrites. So this is a story of when I used to work at a privately owned beauty store as a teenager. The only reason I got the job was because I needed a full-time job, and the owner was one of my mom's closest friends. I had just graduated from high school, and at the time, we had a very unique product line and a particular customer base. Now, because of how unique our products were, they weren't extremely cheap either. Not cheap as drugstore, but not quite as expensive as department store. Most times, I worked alone. It was a pretty easy job. Keep the shelves stocked, clean the store, assist anyone that comes in, fulfill online orders, etc. And like most companies, we also ran promotions once in a while, like sales and makeover events. Now, for the most part, customers were really good about the sales. But sometimes they'd have a coupon for a discount, and they would ask if they could stack the discount on top of a sale. The fine print on the coupons will say no, and when I tell them so, decent people will understand and not fight it. But this is a story about the not so decent. So one day, after having been working there for 6 months or so, this one lady comes in. I had warning bells go off on my head that she would be a difficult and snobby customer. With the giant styled hair, the leopard print clothes, her high-end purse, designer sunglasses, and the extremely powerful smelling perfume. Now, I'm not saying everyone who looks like this is snobby, but it's a pretty high chance in my experience. Still, I do my best to be pleasant and personable. And for the sake of the story and to complete the stereotype, let's call this woman Karen. Karen looked at every item we carried, and I mean every item. The woman would pick up items, test them on her arm, and then ask me questions. She would also unwrap brand new boxes to test on her skin. Now, I did my best to answer her questions, but her silent response after each answer was nerve-wracking because it felt like she didn't approve of what I said. She would glare at me as she contemplated the product, and then she would set it down and move on to the next one. After what felt like forever, she settles on a large number of skincare items that retailed for over $400. As I pull up her total and gave her a boatload of samples, which was very normal of us to do, she starts boasting how she remembered when the shop first opened years ago, and how she tells all of her friends to come here to purchase their makeup and skincare. I just humored her by saying, "Oh really? That's awesome, thank you for spreading the word." The moment I told Karen her total, her face soured, and she shook her head at me and said, "Did you apply my discount?" Confused, I say, "I'm sorry, did you have a coupon?" She said, "No, the friends and family discount. I always get it here when I shop." And this is when I tell Karen, "I'm sorry, but we don't have a friends and family discount. We did have a sale last week though, is that what you're talking about?" At that, Karen shakes her head at me and says, "Yes, you do have that discount. The owner, Mina, gives me the discount every single time. It's for 50% off." Now, Mina was indeed the owner, and it was easy to get her name, considering she had business cards right next to the till with her name and title. But I wasn't going to give this lady a discount just because she said she knew the owner, and definitely not a 50% discount. I tell Karen, "We really don't have a friends and family discount here. Perhaps you came when we had a promotion once." Hearing me say that, she rolls her eyes at me, like an actual adult rolled her eyes at me. She then left and said the owner would hear about this, but I never heard anything about it. I asked the owner if she knew this woman, and she said she's never seen her in her life, and that her friends would never ask for a discount. Ain't that the truth, guys? And honestly, if friends were real friends and they cared about your business, they would be supporting it, not try to cheap out and ask for discounts, especially not half off. You gotta give Karen props though, like what a bold move, guys. And honestly, I wish the owner was at this store so she could come out and be like, I've never seen you before in my life, lady, go home." That said though, I really wonder how many times that's worked for Karen in the past. So for the last dozen years or so, I've been carrying this gorgeous vintage designer bag that I found online. I think I bought it in 2010. I love this bag and I'll carry it until the day it falls apart. I also get tons of compliments on it, and it caused this one crazy story. I spent 3 years working in an Ivy League college town at this upscale clothing boutique. This place catered to wealthy college students and their parents and tourists. We didn't sell anything like this bag, but I suppose I can see where it would have fit in with the things we did sell. One afternoon, I was getting ready to leave for my lunch break, and I had put this vintage bag on the counter while I was putting my coat on. That's when this expensively dressed woman, who had just walked up to the counter, picked up my bag, and she asked my coworker, who was at the register, how much it was. I walk over and I politely take it from her, and I said it was my personal bag that wasn't for sale. The woman literally snatches it out of my hands, and she went off on both of us. The woman was saying the bag was sitting on the counter. It had to be for sale. She just goes on, saying it was obviously much too fancy and expensive of a bag for a retail loser to own, which was actually funny because I didn't work there because I needed money. I worked there as a favor to the owner, who was a friend of the family, basically as a fill-in for one of her full-time employees who had a chronic illness and called in sick a lot. Now, this entitled woman probably would have flipped her lid if I told her that my husband was a professor at our beloved Ivy League school and I could easily afford that bag, thank you very much. So yada yada yada, this woman just kept screaming at us. She wanted that bag so badly, and she absolutely refused to believe it belonged to me. The woman started screaming about wanting to see the manager or the owner, and she didn't believe my coworker when she informed the woman that she was the store manager. We finally told her if she didn't give back my bag and leave the store, we were going to call the police. Well, the woman refused, so the police were called. The police get there, and Karen gets even worse, and she doubles down on her particular form of insanity. She tells the cops it's her bag, and that she brought it in with her, and that we were trying to steal it from her. That's when the cop took the bag away from her, and he opened it up and dumped all the contents on the counter. It contained my cell phone, which of course I knew the passcode to, and she didn't. It also contained my prescription medication bottles in my name, my checkbook, and everything else I carried on a daily basis. You could see the fear creeping into her face as the cop came up with one item after another that proved the bag was mine. When the officer got to my wallet and pulled out what was clearly my license, the woman jerks away from the second cop, who had a hand on her arm and pretty much ran out of the store. Now, I kind of wish they went after her, but apparently they didn't think the situation warranted it, because they just asked us if we considered it worth pursuing her and pressing charges. In that moment, we didn't want to be bothered. We just wanted it over with so we could go on with our day. I now wish that we had, because she needed to be taught a lesson or be forced to get mental help. The woman wasn't the only crazy entitled customer we ever got, but she was one of the most memorable. Yeah, let's all agree it did not need to get to that point. Like, the fact that some people just double down always blows my mind, guys. Like, how some people can't admit when they're wrong is shocking. And I'm also shocked that she stayed long enough to see the whole cops thing through. And for all who are wondering, this is the bag that OP has. Should have told her it was for sale for $5,000. See what she has to say then. So when I moved into my suburban neighborhood, I expected peace and quiet. Instead, I walked into a petty dictatorship run by our HOA president named Todd. And here's the thing, Todd was the worst kind of leader. He was the kind who loved power but hated accountability. The guy would enforce ridiculous rules, like fining people $200 for leaving their trash cans out a minute past 9 a.m. He's also the same person who would ignore the rules when it suited him. The guy's own yard was a mess of unpermitted structures, and his fence was taller than any allowed by city ordinances. But Todd's true sin was he was using the HOA as his personal piggy bank. At first, I tried reasoning with him. My fence was slightly off color because the approved stain wasn't available, and the guy fined me $500. I explained, provided receipts, and asked for leniency. And Todd just smirked at me and said, "Rules are rules," and then he walked away. And that's when I decided that I would take him down. Not with screaming or public arguments, but legally, in a way he'd never recover from. Todd's first mistake was underestimating me. I volunteered for the HOA board under the guise of wanting to get involved in the community. I played the part of the eager, naive newbie perfectly. For 2 years, I attended every meeting, quietly observing how Todd operated. I learned that he controlled the board by bullying other members and burying them in paperwork. I just kept my head down, took detailed notes, and waited. My goal was to outlast his term as president, so I could begin making changes. I then discovered Todd's second mistake. The guy wasn't just a bully, but he was a thief. He loved to brag how he kept the HOA's finances in order, but something didn't add up. The annual HOA fees were high, much higher than in similar neighborhoods, but the common areas were falling apart. The pool was closed half the summer due to maintenance issues, and the landscaping looked like it hadn't been touched in months. And this is when I start digging. As the HOA treasurer, Todd had access to all the accounts, but the guy was notoriously cagey about sharing the financial details. I asked for the budget during a meeting, and Todd just laughed it off, saying, "Don't worry, I've got it under control." So I file a formal request for the financial records, which under HOA rules he was required to provide. Weeks went by with no response, and that's when I start talking to the neighbors. It turns out I wasn't the only one suspicious. I find out that over a dozen homeowners had requested access to the budget over the years, only to be ignored. One neighbor even claimed that Todd had used HOA funds to install a new patio at his house, while another had sworn that he'd seen Todd's kids at the pool during its maintenance closure. So armed with these suspicions, I file a formal complaint with the HOA board, forcing Todd to provide the records. Of course, the guy stalled, but I wasn't backing down. When Todd finally did hand over the financial documents, they were a mess. The invoices were missing, payments were mislabeled, and some expenses were downright bizarre. We found a $15,000 landscaping fee paid to a company that didn't exist. Thousands were spent on administrative costs with no explanation. I cross-referenced the HOA's bank statements with public records, and I found the smoking gun. Todd was funneling money to his personal accounts. And even better, I discovered that Todd was inflating contractor fees and pocketing the difference, and then splitting the profits with his buddy, a shady contractor who handled most of HOA's maintenance. I then compiled everything into a detailed report, complete with spreadsheets, photos, and notarized statements from neighbors who had seen Todd's antics firsthand. I then waited for the annual HOA meeting, which was typically a snooze fest attended by only a handful of homeowners. But this time, I made sure people showed up. I spent weeks knocking on doors, explaining what Todd had been up to, and I didn't share everything, just enough to get people angry and curious. On the night of the meeting, the room was packed. Todd starts the meeting like usual, droning on about how difficult it was to manage the HOA and how much he sacrificed for the community. And that's when I stood up and I calmly asked if he could explain some discrepancies in the budget. Todd just laughed nervously, and he said, "I don't think this is the time or place." I replied, "Actually, Todd, it's the perfect time. Everyone's here." This is when I hand out copies of my report to everyone in the room, and the mood shifted instantly. People started reading, whispering, and then shouting. Todd tried to regain control, but it was too late. I then called for a vote to remove him as president, and by the end of the night, Todd was out. So after Todd was removed, we hire an independent auditor to go through the HOA's finances, and they confirmed everything. Todd had embezzled over $50,000 and mismanaged tens of thousands more, and the guy committed multiple counts of fraud. We report him to the police and we file a civil lawsuit to recover the stolen funds. But it doesn't end there. Todd's shady contractor buddy was also exposed and banned from doing business in the county. Todd had to sell his house to pay restitution and legal fees. His name became a running joke in the neighborhood. Every time I walked past Todd's old house, which is now owned by a lovely family, I smile. The pool's open, the landscaping's beautiful, and the HOA fees are lower than ever. Todd moved to a neighboring town, where he reportedly tried to join another HOA board, only to be laughed out of the room when somebody Googled his name. Justice wasn't served, it was plated, garnished, and savored. So here's a brief backstory. About a year ago, my last remaining grandparent passed away, and my father inherited all assets, including a house. I'd been saving for a nice down payment, at least 50%, so I could have a lower mortgage payment each month, thus allowing me to save money for travel. When my father inherited this house, which he had no interest in moving into yet, he offered to sell it to me for slightly below market rate, with the caveat that he and my stepmother could eventually move into the basement apartment. I agreed, because they're both incredible people who are not at all invasive and would give me privacy if they lived there. So I paid a 60% down payment, financed the rest, and then moved in. So that said, present day. About 6 months ago, I started considering renting out the finished basement apartment. It's got 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a living room, and a small kitchenette that consists of a sink, fridge, microwave, and oven. That's when a friend of mine said that his brother was moving to my city, and he needed a place. He's a brand new teacher and doesn't make great money, so he needs a place that wasn't expensive. I offered to let him rent my basement for way less than market rate, for $650, which would include utilities. He readily accepted and signed a year-long lease. Well, a few days ago, he asked if he could start paying the landlord directly instead of giving me rent money each month. I was under the impression that my friend told him I owned the house, so I was confused and I told him we don't have a landlord and that I'm the owner. At that, he got very upset and he screamed at me for lying for over 6 months and taking advantage of him by making him pay so much in rent. And for the record, an apartment similar to the one in my house would be well over 3 times what he's paying me. And that's 3 times for something not as nice. He asked how much of my mortgage he's covering, and I asked, why does that matter? I tell him, you're getting a nice, quiet place to live, access to a full kitchen and laundry room, and you're paying an amount you can afford. My personal finances aren't really a factor here. Hearing that, he storms out of the room and he slammed the basement door. He's still not speaking to me. I asked a few other friends and some family members, and most said that I'm in the wrong for having him cover my mortgage payments. Only a few say I'm in the right. So am I the a-hole for having my roommate cover $650 of my $775 a month mortgage? Okay, I really don't know why OP's family members and friends say that they're the a-hole. Like, what are they expecting that dude to pay? Like, absolutely nothing? Like, the guy's paying a third of market rate, and he has the nerve to complain. I would be kicking that dude to the curb. And this is why it's sometimes difficult to deal with friends of friends, because some people think they deserve special treatment because they know someone. It's also funny how he outright asked OP, how much of your mortgage am I covering? Like, does the guy not understand if he can't afford to buy a place of his own and that he's renting, that he's essentially covering the landlord's mortgage every month? Like, holy, the entitlement of some people, right? And if I were OP, I would be looking at terminating the guy's lease and letting him pay the $2,000 a month somewhere else. But yeah, guys, let me know your thoughts. And that, my friends, brings us to another end of our /EntitledPeople. If you enjoyed today's stories, hit that thumbs up, and if you're not subscribed, consider subscribing so you don't miss these crazy stories. And if you missed the last episode on the channel, it's another r/EntitledPeople episode, where a Karen gets tossed in jail for the most absurd reason ever. Guys, go check it out if you haven't, and myself and Stevie Boy will see you guys in the next one. We love you.